Hi. Today I want to talk about misgendering. And misgendering can happen in a lot of different situations, and in some of those situations it can be sort of kind of understandable. Maybe, for instance, if a trans person has just come out to a friend or family member who's known them as one gender for a really long time and is making an effort to come to understand this person as being a different gender than the gender that they've thought of them as for so long. That person may understandably perhaps struggle with it. It's an adjustment for them too. They may slip up occasionally. Hopefully when they do, they apologize and they continue making every effort to, correct themselves and not do that again in the future. I'm not really talking about that kind of misgendering. I'm talking about the sort of misgendering that might happen to a trans person at a coffee shop or a restaurant or an airport or really anywhere. From someone who doesn't know them, but who has had a little time to kind of take them in and come to come to a conclusion about them. Ellen Page, in her coming out speech, said, the world would be a whole lot better if we just made an effort to be less horrible to one another. And that's not any grand insight or anything. That's not some profound truth that has never been revealed before. But it is an enduring truth that we need to be reminded of from time to time. And, when I go into a coffee shop or a restaurant, and someone who's there, to assist me, takes a little time to look me up and down, and then proceeds to call me sir, what I hear when this is done to me or to other transgender people is not, I made an honest mistake. It's what instead I hear that as is them saying, I understand that transgender people supposedly exist in this world. However, I refuse to make any effort to accommodate them into my worldview. I refuse to make that effort to kind of short circuit the little voice in my head that puts this person into the box of being this gender or that gender, and to take in all the other cues that their fashion, perhaps their hair, their jewelry, their accessories, their anything else about them might be communicating to me, and to use that as something to determine something about this person's identity or experience. And look, I understand that you might see a transgender person and not be sure if they identify as a man or as a woman, or if they don't identify as either of those genders, but as some other gender. So my feeling is, just stop falling back on words like sir or ma'am in situations where you may be uncertain. I'm not going to be furious if someone doesn't constantly call me ma'am or miss. But if someone calls me sir, yeah, I'm going to get upset. But you don't need to use either of those terms, right? You can always be polite and proceed through any sort of social interaction without falling back on these sorts of gendered terms like sir or ma'am. You don't need to use them. And so if you're at all unsure, just don't use them. You can also always ask, right? I went to an Apple store once and I had to use my credit card to make a purchase, and my credit card had my legal name on it, which is a male name. However, the very perceptive employee there understood that the name on my card may not be the name that I actually use, or the name with which I identify, and so he simply asked me, what is your preferred name? It was a very small but very nice gesture that made all the difference in the world. You know, simply by saying that, he was saying to me, I see who you are. I see from the way that you present yourself that this name on this card is perhaps probably not, you know, the person that you see yourself as. And it just made me feel like he saw me as a human being, which is all I want, right? That's all any of us should want or expect in these sorts of interactions, is to acknowledge each other as human beings and to be acknowledged as human beings. When you don't do that, when you decide to let the fact that you can tell that a person was assigned a specific gender at birth and to use that to determine your sense of who they are and to completely ignore everything else that they might be communicating to you about who they are, you are dehumanizing them. You are stripping them of their identity. You are certainly not making that tiny effort that Ellen Page referred to for us to just be a little less horrible to one another. And, you know, it's true, it's certainly true that as a transgender person, being misgendered at a coffee shop is really pretty low on the spectrum of horrible things that can happen and that do happen to transgender people all the time. And I acknowledge that. However, it's all connected, right? Whether you're talking about an individual refusing to acknowledge a person's gender, or you're talking about the institutionalized misgendering that leads to a woman being placed in a men's prison after defending herself from assault, it is a social problem. It is a society-wide problem, and it is a problem that needs to start really actively being dismantled. It is time for everyone to start being aware that transgender people are here, that we share in this world, that we are your brothers and sisters, and that our identities and that our experiences are valid